Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome to VR Revelations. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in. So let's jump right into it. Looks like the House of Congress in the United States has approved, from what I was reading, $14.5 billion in aid to Israel for the war that is taking place right now against Hamas, especially, Israel's attacks and aggression towards the strip of Gaza. Now, of course, this has been, something that is all over social media. There is a great divide right now across the world between people that essentially are siding with Israel and those that are siding with the Palestinians. Now, of course, all this has sprung forth from the attack on October 7th that was launched on Israel by this militant Islamist group known as Hamas, right? They broke into the land of Israel and they killed hundreds of people. Of course, a lot of graphic images and videos were shown throughout the course of the day on October 7th. And, it pretty much made world news, and it was really shocking, something we really hadn't seen for quite a while, even with everything going on in Ukraine right now. This was just really very brutal. These Hamas terrorists, because that's what these people are that carried out this attack, essentially went into Israel to cause terror. They started shooting people out in the streets. Really terrible images. Of course, Israel then declared war, and now they are pretty much perpetrating the same level of devastation on the people that are in Gaza. Now, Israel claims that they are trying to fight Hamas, but for these last couple of weeks, Israel has nonstop just bombarded the Gaza Strip, this small little piece of land where, millions of Palestinians reside. And the thing is that they have been killing a lot of innocent people because a lot of these Hamas militants are actually underground. And, when you have large bombardments, you're going to have a lot of casualties, right? And most of the people there, they're not part of Hamas. They're not actually, militants that attacked Israel. They're just regular civilians. And we're seeing a lot of graphic pictures and videos online right now. If you have any of these social media apps, I'm sure you've come across a lot of these videos. Children dismembered, getting blown up there in the Gaza Strip. And now the amount of casualties suffered in the Gaza Strip have greatly surpassed the number of casualties that were suffered by Israel on October 7th by the Hamas attack. And so we have this great divide right now where a lot of people are essentially, calling on the nations to do something about these bombardments that are taking place in Hamas. But we see that most of the Western countries still continue to support Israel. Now, you can get caught up in all of the politics of this, in the history between Israel and the Palestinians, right? All the way back to World War II, when the United Nations gathered together and created this plan for this, two-state solution where they wanted to give the Jews a place to live. And, at that time they chose what we now know as Israel, except at that time the majority of the population were Palestinians. And so throughout time, this conflict grew between the Jews and the Palestinians there. Fast forward to 2003, Israel is one of the strongest militaries, if not the strongest military in that area of the world. And so, it's no surprise that most of the Muslim world around, or all those nations that are Muslim around Israel, really sort of have this animosity, this hatred towards Israel, because they don't see them as a legitimate state. They sort of see them as these, as these people who wrongfully came and took control of a area that belonged to the Palestinians. And so, the U.S. and England and all of these Western countries, ever since after World War II, have always sided and supported Israel. And I've talked about the spiritual aspect of this in my previous video, talking about the war that is taking place right now in Israel, and how, this is all biblical in nature. The Bible told us that Israel would be at war, and that eventually it would be surrounded by nations that were looking to destroy it. Now, I'm not saying this to justify Israel, because of course, if you read the Bible, you know that the Old Testament is essentially the history of Israel and how God was dealing with Israel and how he tried to bless them and use them as a nation to bring about the truth of God to the world. But when you read the Old Testament, we understand that Israel continued to disobey God throughout their history. Essentially, they sinned. They didn't follow God's commandment. And so God, being just and holy and righteous and true to his word that, he would punish those that sinned, he continually, would punish Israel for their disobedience. And many times he used other nations, such as the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Romans, to punish Israel, to bring them back into obedience. And so, there are a lot of Jews that genuinely follow God, that follow those commandments, not to murder, not to steal, and all these things. But again, not all of Israel is Israel, right? Just as not all Christians are real Christians that actually live by the word. And so a lot of the things, that Israel is doing right now are just horrible, and really they're politically motivated. But still, the United States continues to support Israel because of this biblical connection, because the U.S. is a Christian nation, and they understand that Israel is, part of the Bible, of, this Judeo-Christian religion. And so no matter what happens between Israel and these Muslim nations, the U.S. always sides with Israel. They're never really siding with the Muslims because they're contrary, essentially, to the Christian religion, which more closely aligns with Judaism, because of course Christianity is rooted in Judaism. And so it's no surprise that the U.S. is taking this stand to support Israel, and they're refusing to condemn these bombardments that are taking place in Hamas, that are killing hundreds of innocents there and children. Again, the images are just horrible. But you have to understand that, this war isn't going to stop. It was prophesied in the Bible that, there would always be conflict between Israel, who are, biblically speaking, the descendants of Isaac, and the Muslims, who are Ishmaelites, who are the descendants of Ishmael. Now, these were both sons of Abraham. That's why these religions are known as Abrahamic religions, because they claim to be rooted geona, I'm sorry, their genealogy, they trace it back to Abraham. And so, in the Bible, it tells us that God told Abraham that the Ishmaelites, his son Ishmael would be blessed, and his descendants would also be blessed with abundance, and they would prosper, but that, he would be they would be a nation, a people that would always be sort of in conflict with Isaac's descendants, who, according to the Bible, was really the promised son by which God would fulfill his plan of redemption and bless all the nations. Of course, we understand that Jesus, when we trace his genealogy, physically speaking, we trace it back to Isaac, right, through that lineage. But again, I'm not gonna dive into that into the Bible genealogies and all of that. But yeah, essentially what is going on right now is that the U.S., because it's a Christian nation, continues to support Israel. Israel, it's no secret that they want to destroy the Palestinians, because they do feel like God is essentially getting ready to establish their kingdom as it was promised in the Bible. But of course, they don't understand that really God is talking about the kingdom of Christ. When Christ comes and he sits on the throne of David, he will really establish Jerusalem, right? The New Jerusalem. But Israel right now, they think that, this is sort of God getting ready to deliver them of their enemies, to establish Israel as he promised. And so in the eyes of the Jews, again, they don't believe in Christ. They don't believe in turning the other cheek. They don't believe in loving your enemies. They still adhere essentially to the Old Testament way of life, and eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, avenge yourself of your enemies, destroy your enemies completely. So they still have this mindset, and they're essentially not having any mercy right now on the Palestinian people, unfortunately. And as a Christian, I do pray for the innocent there in Palestine, for those children, as well as I pray for the innocent in Israel, as well as I pray for the innocent in Ukraine right now, and in Russia, and all over the world. We're taught as Christians to pray for our enemies, for those that persecute us, for the sinner. And so, just as God has had mercy on us, we have to also pray for others and have mercy on others. But Israel, they don't have this mindset. They're out to completely destroy the Palestinians, and if it's left up to them, they'll probably seek to destroy all Muslims, essentially. And again, Muslims pretty much hate Jews also because of this this spiritual conflict. And so Israel knows that they have the U.S. and England and all these Western nations in their pockets because they are Christian nations. I saw a video the other day of Netanyahu, from like a couple of years ago, way back, talking about his plan to essentially push out the Palestinians, and how he would make the U.S. support them through propaganda. And he actually said that the Americans were very easily manipulated, and in a way, he was right about that. Again, you just have to sort of bring up the Bible, and you pretty much have America on your side. But again, this is where a lot of Christians confuse this, and they actually, because they do believe in the scriptures, they they side with Israel, much like the U.S. is doing, and they also support what the U.S. is doing, right? Like with these $14 billion, which these congressmen and women have decided to send to Israel. And again, it's no surprise that most of the congressmen and women are Christian and believe. Of course, there's some Jews mixed in there, along with maybe a few Muslims. But the majority are Christians, so it's no surprise that they made this decision. And the thing where people have the wrong notion of the U.S. and Israel is in thinking that they are actually more righteous than the Muslim world or than their enemies. Because if you actually were to take a look at the U.S. and to take a look at Israel and judge them by their works and in the way they carry out their society and their morals, they're completely opposed to the Bible, right? They're full of sin. I mean, if you look at the U.S. And society, right, fornication, adultery, sodomy, all of these things which the Bible tells us not to do, they actually celebrate this, right, in their pride parades, in their liberties, their so-called liberties, which is just it's just another way of saying, you have free will to sin and to live however you want as long as you don't harm anybody. And even Israel, who are supposed to be a holy land, have been infected by this whole libertarian movement into this promiscuous and liberal type of life, to the point where in the capital there in Jerusalem, they also have all these parades celebrating all this perversion. So, they're trying to make it seem like they're sitting there representing God and God's will, when by their actions, they're actually opposing what God has told us to do, right? To live righteously, to separate ourselves from all this corruption, all this immorality. So in reality, the U.S. and Israel are no better than any other nations that they are fighting. They are ripe for judgment, and God is getting ready to judge this world, and He will judge the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is literally like the modern Sodom and Gomorrah. Any Christian that's honest about it can pretty much see it. And even the Republicans in the U.S. who like to think themselves as more Christian than the Democrats, they don't even speak out against homosexuality or fornication or all the drug usage, all the lies, all the perversion that is taking place in society. Yeah, they speak out against transsexuals and all of these things that are they see as extreme. But when you actually take a look at sodomy and all of those, they stay quiet. They always defer back to the opinion that people should have the right to live however they want. We really don't want to control what they're doing in their bedrooms in secret, or their way of life. We just don't want them to push this on our children, which again, it's a flawed argument from a Christian point of view. We know that Sodom and Gomorrah, who were not even as bad as society is nowadays, were judged just because of their sodomy. That's literally where the word sodomy comes from Sodom and Gomorrah. And God judged them by fire. And, Jesus told us that in the end of days, it would be just like it was in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. And actually, it's even more perverse, as we can see nowadays. I mean, there's people out there that literally think they are, women, and men think women thinking they're men and mutilating themselves. So some people think they're horses or aliens. I mean, it's just a complete insane asylum with this facade of, a civilized people of liberty. And That's really the issue with democracy, which, again, it's just a human-made philosophy, right? That the masses, the population, the peoples of the earth can essentially do whatever they want, whatever is right in their own eyes, as long as they're not harming anybody. It's just a completely satanic notion. And this is what has led to all this promiscuity and all this perversion in society nowadays. And that's exactly why God is getting ready to judge the world. And, the Bible tells us that there would be signs of the end of days. And one of those big signs was the nation of Israel. For the last 2,000 years, ever since, I believe, the year 69 AD, I believe, when I think it was the Roman general, later emperor, Titus, or Titus, however you want to pronounce it, and correct me if I'm wrong on the dates. He destroyed Jerusalem, and from there on forward, the Jews didn't have a nation, a literal nation to call home up until after World War II, when Hitler tried to exterminate the Jews. And, the United Nations decided to give the Jewish people a place to call home. And, it's no coincidence that that place is Israel, where the Jews lived during the times of the Romans and even before that, right? And so one of the biblical prophecies was that Israel would once again be a nation before the end of days. And we also have another prophecy that clearly tells us that Israel would be surrounded by essentially all the nations of the world right before the return of Christ, of the Messiah, who they are waiting for, except they don't believe that it was Jesus Christ. But this is another prophecy, and even everything going on in Ukraine is also, biblical and spiritual in nature. And again, you have to remember that the Bible clearly tells us that our war as human beings isn't against flesh and blood, right? It's not against the Chinese or the Russians, although those wars do take place, and you are called to defend your nation by the government. Our real battle is not against other human beings, but it's against Satan, right? Against a spiritual force of darkness, not just an idea, but an actual being, an actual fallen angel who is in control because God allows him until his will, until his word and his prophecies are fulfilled. God allows Satan to do these things before he's actually judged and destroyed. And so we understand that Satan is in control of all of the nations of the earth right now. And, that's the whole reason why we see this hatred between these people. That's why we see these people using religion to justify their actions, much like we would see, the Crusades, the Catholic Church ordering these crusades to go and kill innocents, millions of Protestants, and all of these atrocious things that they would do in the name of God. But we know that a real man or woman who is a true follower of God is a peace-seeking person, is a person that is willing to lay down their life for their friends, who is not willing to murder, but rather to be murdered, knowing that there is a God that is going to judge the wicked and all of these people that have used his name to bring about evil. But again, we live in a fallen world that is full of corruption. All the while, they're all claiming to, be doing God's will, when in reality, God's judgment is that the whole world has gone astray, has gone, in the ways of Satan and evil, causing murders, destruction, injustice, inequality, and all of these things. And so God has to judge the world. But do keep an eye out on the U.S. Because this is essentially, this is the reason why they will continue to support Israel. Again, when will this conflict stop between Israel and the Palestinians and the other nations? When the world ends, when Christ returns again, according to the Bible, there won't be an end. We will continue to see, tensions flare up in that area of the world, and unfortunately, we're going to continue to see these atrocities being committed by both sides. There might be short-term peace agreements or ceasefires, but it's just not going to stop. We're in the end of days if you believe in the Scripture. And eventually, as I've mentioned in other videos, even the United States is going to turn against Israel, because that's exactly what the Bible tells us. And when that happens, when all nations surround Israel, even its allies right now, then you have to look up, because we're getting ready for the return of Christ. And what's going on with Russia, right? We're not hearing anything about Russia right now. The U.S. has completely forgotten about Ukraine. They're not even mentioning it on the news right now. We just saw an article on Times Magazine talking about how Zelensky's, close officials are saying that he's pretty much gone insane, much like Hitler did, thinking that, they can still achieve victory and all of these things. So, as terrible as it sounds, this whole conflict in Israel right now couldn't have come at a better moment for the United States, literally as an off-ramp from the Ukraine conflict. Essentially, they were stuck there having to send constant money, knowing that the war was unwinnable from the beginning. Again, you can't defeat these nuclear superpowers. They can self-destruct from the inside through a revolution or something like that, but you're not going to defeat them because they have nuclear weapons. They have the capacity to completely destroy their enemies, or at the very least, a mutually assured destruction. So the notion that Ukraine ever stood a chance against Russia was a fallacy from the beginning, and that's what I have been saying all along, and many of these other people that have been reporting on this conflict. And so now this has provided the perfect off-ramp for the U.S. Zelensky has to be just furious and just feeling absolutely betrayed, but it's his own fault, and really the people of Ukraine are the ones that are suffering and are going to suffer this major defeat here. And, the U.S. really doesn't have, an ultimate goal here. They're sort of just mindlessly supporting all these wars here. I'm sure if China decides to invade Taiwan, they're also going to send billions of dollars over to Taiwan, even though that's unwinnable. And what this is doing is just accelerating the major economic collapse that we're seeing right now in the U.S., which again is part of biblical prophecy. We know that the Bible tells us that there will be a one world economic order in the end of days, where no one will be able to buy or sell except those that receive the mark of the beast. Of course, there's a lot of speculation about that. I have my own thoughts on that, but I'll leave that for another video. And so there will be a collapse. It has to be. It's the precursor to this new world economic order, which is going to come via the U.S. and all its allies. And as I mentioned before, even though nobody expects it, I believe it is going to be headed by the Catholic Church. And again, keep your eye on the Catholic Church. They've called for peace in Ukraine, but you'll see that. But if you pay close attention, you'll realize that they are definitely on the side of Ukraine and the U.S. So, the U.S. is sending more money. This is only going to increase tensions over there. Fortunately, it's going to lead to more killing. But at the end of the day, this is just going to backfire, just like the situation in Ukraine backfired for the U.S. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. God bless and have a wonderful day.